Thank you, RC and Rich, give me a great opportunity to present, to discuss this paper. I'm very excited for a couple of reasons. First, I always thought I was too old to be a millennial, but after reading the first paragraph of the paper, I figured I am the oldest cohort of the generation, so I like the paper instantly. Second, whenever I teach my students about the concept of the time value of money and also the power of compounding, I ask them to the first exercise is to make their own retirement plan when they are 21 years old, when they are 23 years old. And they think that's a joke. And then when the first assignment is to calculate how much they need to save before they can retire, to calculate the nest egg. And they come up with a crazy number of $3 million, $2 million, and they just go crazy. They think it's not possible, but I say, calm down, save a couple hundreds every month for the next 40 years with the power of compounding, and then figure out they can do it. All right? So I think it's interesting to see whether or not their generation or my generation are doing good to save early and save well, and based on the conclusion, we don't save early enough. So, let's see, okay. So I think, why should we care? And this is probably the best introduction I read for many papers. It set up the question very well. Why should we care about this particular generation? Why not generation X, or why not other generation? And there are a couple of reasons. The first is there's less coverage from the employees. There's a shift from defined benefit to the defined contribution. And also the reduction of retiree pay benefit, I think, since up to 2000 by Richard's early papers. So they basically push the responsibilities from the employees to the employees. The second, unfortunately, it's a trend we want them to take more responsibility for themselves, but then they enter the market in the wrong time. There's unfavorable economic trends, stagnating wages for decades now, increasing debts, the higher student debts when they out of the school, get their first job, they probably already have, 30,000, 40,000 student debt already. We also see declining home ownership, although I will argue the declining home ownership may be a different interesting question separate from the other finding you find. And the last one, luckily or not luckily, we have a higher life expectancy, we live longer. But if you study health economics, live longer doesn't mean we live healthier. And then they actually will have higher medical cost in the other end of the spectrum. So just given this fact, yes, I'm sorry, this is a big question. We need to pay attention to it. And we probably want to pay attention to earlier in the stage when we still have time to compound that earlier savings. Just summarize some of your findings. I was very surprised and glad, happy to see the better education attainment for both men and women, especially women who have a 4-year college degree above is 40% higher than men, 34%. And we see different results in labor participation and earnings between men and women. Again, some of it is due to the recession, but women is doing better for men because compared to their previous generation because they have a better education, where the improvement of education in men probably is less impactful. I also see there's a slide in the paper is that there's alarming lower participation in employee spouse retirement plan for both men and women compared to their previous generation. But I found it's interesting is if you compare the absolute numbers, there are more women in the millennial generation enrolled in the employee spouse retirement plan compared to men. So I don't know, I'm just curious whether or not it's because men and women work in different industry. Services industry is more likely to provide employee spouse retirement plan compared to manufacturing, or it's because personal finance decisions. It's not new that women are better in making financial decisions, so maybe that is good to add it to that literature. And you look at a different measurement of financial asset. You look at the net worth, household net worth, and home ownership, and also I think the retirement accounts, the percentage of retirement account, and also the value of the asset of the retirement account. So it's very clear home ownership is lower than previous generation, but not for other financial asset. I don't see the big contracts for other financial asset. And if you condition on people who have a retirement account, I think the value is even higher or slightly higher for the millennial compared to the the previous cohort, I think 75 to 79. So it seems to me home ownership is a very distinct question and feature compared to retirement saving and other financial assets. So why is that? Why our generation doesn't want to own a home? I think that itself is a very interesting question and could be expanded in the future studies. So some thoughts. I'm not an expert about the method, so just take my comments from the general audience. So we always have people say 30 is the new 20s, 40 is the new 30s, and I thought that's a way to console people who feel they are behind in their life. But especially when I was in graduate school, this is very helpful. But in reading your paper, I find it's true. People delaying. People are more likely to have a 4-year college, and they may enter the labor market later, and they also marry later, and now they probably own their home later. So it seems to me that there's a shift of the major timeline to later of their life. And so should we still compare the same ages? Say you compare 70s to 4 different generations. Should we compare 70s of a millennial to, let's say, I don't know, maybe 65s to the previous generation boomers? Maybe we can see a more comparable result. And if that's the case, what's the implication for policy? And I think I would like to see more policy discussion in the paper or in the future iteration of the papers. The one problem I see is from delaying savings or owning home, if you consider home is a big important asset for retirement, is they have less time to compound. And therefore, the only option, or one of the very limited options, is to delay their retirement. And you use 75% replacement rate as a benchmark. I understand in retirement planning, the 75% or 70% is a pretty common benchmark. But my question is whether or not you can try to consider floor or ceiling, because for someone who is making 300,000 per year, they don't need 75% to live a comfortable life. For someone who is making 50,000, 40,000, 75% may not be sufficient to live a comfortable life. So create that kind of bandwidth maybe could provide some additional information. In the paper, you separate the prediction by genders, and I wonder, could you have enough statistics power to separate by the race and education group? As you mentioned earlier, this is the median, so I think we're interested in the inequality of wealth, inequality in income. So maybe there's a disparity in preparation for retirement savings, and if we want to achieve some policy changes and to address specific group, maybe this will be more helpful to target the specific group that need more resources. And more young adults now live with parents, and in order to save rents and pay down their debt. So how this may affect your result? If they are able to, if they don't own home now, but able to pay debt faster, whether or not that would be a favorable change to see. This morning I read Wall Street Journal as an article. It's 26% of a young adult living with family, parents or relatives. So 26%. So that pattern has increased after the financial crisis and then has not decreased. And rising medical costs, we have an obesity epidemic in this country. It is estimated by 2030, 50% of the population in this country will be obese. Currently, I think it's 30%. So it is, I don't know in your model how can you address this, but I think it's important to consider. And last, if we think the solution is to delay retirement, are we ready for that changes? Is our society ready for that? So we cannot ask someone who is 65, 67 to do the same work they did when they're 60, so 57. So if we want to address some policies, and if we think it's a policy recommendation we want to moving forward, there should be a collective effort for people who want to work older and they can work older. Thank you.